Okay, we're going to be talking about academic tutoring and more of a holistic approach to it. And that means that we are going to be talking about not only the assignment that the student is bringing to you, but also what the whole person, not just focusing on the writing assignment or the math assignment, what have you, but just taking in the whole person, as in the holistic approach to tutoring. Maybe just the more human approach, huh? So we have KWL here. Whoops. KWL here, and I would just like for you to take a moment and tell me what you already know about tutoring. And so we know and we want to know, and we will get to the learned part at the end of this session. So we're going to continue on. And this is the outcome of the session, is that we want to be able to incorporate all the elements of a tutoring session, be able to greet a student, be friendly when in the greeting and during the session, personable, approachable, what have you. We also want to make sure that the agenda is student-driven. By that I mean that we are in a conversation with the student, asking them what it is that they would like to work on. An opportunity to summarize the content and check for understanding. And also conclude with a positive statement and plan follow-up sessions if need be. Okay, this is just a quote from Arthur Chickering. Fundamental purpose of tutoring is to help students become effective agents for their lifelong learning. We want to think more of tutoring as a collaboration, a conversation. Think of it like this, that you are already a member of the academic community, and there's a certain way that academics speak and discourse and converse about academia. And when students are working in their studies and writing and solving problems and doing whatnot with their classes, they too are striving to be members of this discourse community, which is academia. And by having conversations with people who are already members, which is you, and already understand the discourse of academia, the students, they too can become members of that same community. That's why conversation is so, so important in tutoring. It's just a way of thinking about it. The theories that inform appreciative tutoring is the social constructivist theory, which is the necessary components for learning. This is how we all learn, with social interaction, cultural mutual respect, and collaboration. If you think back to how you learned anything, even outside of school, you learn it through social interaction. It's the rare person who can learn things without interacting with fellow human beings. So, and two important concepts of this theory are the zone of proximal development, and scaffolding. And that is what makes the peer tutoring model so effective. We can build connections with tutors when they engage in, students can build connections with tutors when they engage in collaborative learning through social interaction, which improves skills and increases academic success. Okay? Important. Tutoring is a conversation. We have to remember that. So the zone of proximal development is just something to know of and be aware of. This is Vygotsky. He came up with this theory that students come to us with things that they already know. They already know this, certain things, and they come to us with the desire to learn more or to understand more deeply. And that is the zone right there that both the tutor and the students are in, and hoping to get to the part where learning can take place. And we do that through scaffolding, okay? A student comes to us with foundational knowledge. All college students know something. They know something. That's why they're in college. And they come to the tutoring center or the writing center with a foundation of knowledge. But sometimes there are things that they cannot do on their own. Maybe they've never heard of it. It's a brand new concept. Further explanation is needed. And that's where scaffolding comes in. And when we scaffold for a student, then new meaning can be made. And it's actually a wonderful thing to see. Okay, so types of scaffolding. Graphic organizers. Venn diagrams are great to compare and contrast with. This is what I do with students who are writing this kind of essay, is compare and contrast essay, and we do a Venn diagram, and they write it down, and pretty soon they have the entire paper in front of them through a Venn diagram. Flow charts are good. Illustrating things, hierarchies, anything that we can think of that can help the student. These are study techniques too. Prepared cards to assist discussion, vocabulary words, formulas to associate with the problem, concepts to define, maps that show relationships, partially or completed maps for students. Students can create their own maps based on their current knowledge of the task or the concept. Anything at all that we can help students, teach them techniques to help them, guide them to what they are seeking, the answers that they're seeking. We can show them similar problems on the paper. Examples, this is great. We don't really want to take in fact, we never want to take the problems that students bring to us and say, these are the problems my teacher assigned, or this is the subject on which I need to write a thesis statement. Can you do that for me so I know how to do it? No, we just want to write a different thesis statement and show students how to build one and how to construct a thesis statement, or use a different math problem, different chemistry problem, to show students how to do the ones that are in front of them that the teacher has assigned. Lots of handouts, prepared handouts that can contain tasks and content-related information. The Writing Center has many handouts. The Tutoring Center, yes, handouts in the Tutoring Center. Here we are all online. We are going to have to work on that one because lots of textbooks and help are in the Tutoring Center, but that doesn't help us much on Zoom. So someone asked that question. We will certainly get to that on how we can work around that. Hints, suggestions, and clues to move the process along. Find the subject and verb. Try multiplying both sides by 3. Anything at all that we can lead the student to what they are seeking. I keep saying that because it's not saying, we don't ever want to say, oh, that's the subject and that's the verb. We want students to discover this information on their own through a conversation. Prompts, a physical or verbal cue to remind, to aid in the recall of prior assumed knowledge. Many times it can just be, you know, little things like this. Keep going. Yes, good. Tell me why. Why do you think that is? So on and so forth. Question stems are also good. This work very well in the Writing Center and the work that I do with students who use English as an additional language. It encourages deep thinking by using higher order, the what if questions, incomplete sentences. Last thing, stories. Stories relate complex and abstract material to situations more familiar with students. Stories can inspire and motivate learners. Sometimes it's good to say, you know, if we grew up in the US culture, go ahead and use the story to try to help a student understand the material from your culture. But then say also, do you have anything like that in the culture that you grew up in? And many times students will be able to say, oh yes, that's very familiar. It's like this and that and the other thing in the country where I grew up. We always want to have cultural competence too, that not everybody's going to catch US cultural references in assignments. So it's good to start with stories and then have the student add in their own. Okay, so an appreciative tutoring session has 6 parts. I'm just looking over here, watching my time. Okay, so we want to focus on what the student can do, and that is where you start. We don't want to jump in and immediately start from the beginning, right? Because students come to us with lots of knowledge. We want to begin with where they are and understand what they already can do so that we can build on that. And that's where we start, okay? Hang on just a second. How about if I just call on somebody who I know is an experienced tutor, and maybe you could give us an example of how you would introduce yourself to the student. Christine, is that something you would like to do for us?
Yeah, I can do that. Hi, how are you? I'm Christine. Then they tell me their name and I ask them, what are you going to be, or what are we going to be working on today? Or what can I help you with?
Okay, very, very good. Anyone else? Jessica, how about you? You have anything to add to that?
That's pretty similar to what I'll usually say. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add to that? What about the very first time that we meet a student? What would we want to do? Anyone? Who's a returning tutor? No? Okay, I'll just go ahead and give an example. When I'm tutoring, I usually have the tutor comes into a room that I tutor in, and I introduce myself. I'm Catherine. How are you doing today? What is your name? And if it is a name unfamiliar to my native speaking English ears, I ask the student for the pronunciation, and then I also ask them to write it down for me. And then I practice pronouncing it a couple of times because sometimes I can really mess that up. And that way I can remember their name. I'm pretty good at remembering names when I do that. And then, like Christine so nicely said, we talk about what are you working on? What would you like to see today? What would you like the outcome to be today? What is the end goal here? Anything like that that gets the student talking. And you know, sometimes it can start out too with how's the semester going? Are you finding all of your classes? Anything that makes the student just, you know, be a little bit more comfortable. And we want to set the session up for success, and we want to develop the appropriate atmosphere, gain trust, and establish a comfortable environment. This is something also that might be a little more conducive, of course, when we are in person with our students, but we can still do this on Zoom, can't we? We can have no distractions in the background. We can make sure that if we have a dog, maybe we can put the dog somewhere where that won't be a distraction. But I understand the challenges of being at home and doing this on Zoom. But just try your best, do your best. Everybody is offered a lot of grace here navigating this online environment. So just be the tutor and the person you would like to see on a Zoom meeting and go from there, okay? All right, we want to set the session up for success, which of course is smile and make eye contact through Zoom and as much as you can. And of course, greet the student by name. One way Zoom works for us is the name is right there underneath the person's beautiful face. So we could always say, you know, hello, Zachariah, or welcome, Maria. How are you doing today? That goes a long way. We're not going to be able to shake hands. I don't know, not now, but maybe not in the near future or ever. Who knows? But we won't go over that. We want to eliminate unfriendly distractions. Of course, it's much easier to hide all this stuff when we're doing Zoom. So, you know, just put stuff on the floor, personal items, homework out of sight line of the camera. This, of course, applies to the face-to-face, which is the power dynamic. We don't need to carry on about that too much with Zoom because we are not sitting at a table. We can, however, address this, eliminate emotional barriers to learning. Many of the students will be coming to tutoring sessions feeling pretty, inadequate, frustrated, sometimes desperate. And it's our job to make them feel very comfortable that we too were in the same situation that they are in. There was a time when we possibly didn't understand something, had a lot of questions, needed someone just to team up with us and guide us and help us to find the answer. And that's where you can come in, is offering empathy and making the student feel like it's going to be all right. Today's going to be okay, and we can work through this and understand what's on your mind, and no problem there. We all have a different way of doing that, so I'm not going to give you hard examples of how to do that because every person is different. But just be aware of that students are sometimes coming to us with an emotional baseline, maybe I should say, that we can work to deconstruct and unravel and just help them be more comfortable on the Zoom meeting. And group tutoring, we would be all on Zoom. Zoom is very conducive to conversation because we're all in front of each other. So we won't go into that too much. The identify phase, that's where we want to talk about a few scenarios. A student you are working with wants help with brainstorming a topic for a paper, writing a thesis, working on a rough draft, and the final paper is due by tomorrow. Anybody in the Writing Center would have a response to this?
I would probably ask them what they feel is the most important part of the paper to cover first, because we only get 30 minutes together, and if they want to get as much done as possible, maybe it's important that they get the most important points done first.
Okay.
So if they're not sure what those are, I might suggest maybe picking a topic first, and maybe like an outline if that's something they think that that could help them.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's excellent. Yeah, just draw the student out and ask them what is the most important thing that you're struggling with. You're obviously not going to be able to help them through this and get the paper in one day, although that has happened. That has happened. And whatever grade they got, I have no idea, but a student did manage to do that. And I did, like Christine said, start out with nail down a topic. And then I left the room and went and got a cup of coffee, came back, they had a topic. And then I showed them how to build a thesis. And then I went and helped another student and they actually had a thesis. And then they worked on a rough draft, came back the next day and we went over it and they revised it. And I think they got it in by the deadline. But I did say up front, this might be a tough one. And you may not be able to get this done in time. So let's work on the most important part. And here's another scenario. For math tutors, A student you are working with asks you, can you just explain derivatives to me? That's the only thing they want, and they want you to explain what they are. What would your response be?
I'd probably want to like get a problem ready just for like to make sure that they understand. That would be like my first thought. And then I would say, okay, so we're going to break down this problem into how to, it'd probably be a basic problem. So I would just ask about like, okay, do you understand these definitions, whatever necessary definitions you would need to understand derivatives, and then assuming they do, kind of put one piece down and then ask, what do you think would happen next, you know? Give every opportunity for them to finish out the problem.
Yeah. Is that it? Okay, Sam, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. Giving them the opportunity to solve the problem instead of just going right into a explanation of what derivatives are. So wonderful responses, thank you. Okay, then we have the identify phase. And we want to ask positive open-ended questions to identify what it is that the student wants to work on. We want to determine the objective of the session, I should say. And how do we do that? We do that with active listening. It will allow the tutor to adjust the session's goals based on the student's greatest need at the time and allow the task to be broken into more achievable parts, which is so, so important. And then we can affirm, rephrase, and summarize what they have said, okay? It's very difficult when a student sits down and says, this is my assignment, and I have no idea where to begin. Can you just tell me what to do? That's when we start talking and we start asking questions about, do you understand this part? What do you remember the instructor saying about that part? Where was it that it became blurry or muddy? So that way we can determine exactly what the student knows and doesn't know. We ask the student to explain the thought process that they use to complete the task, whether it's a math problem or writing an essay, either one, okay? And this is called learning. If we show the student the process, then the student will know the answer, but they will not have learned it. They will just know it. It's like trivia. We don't really learn trivia, we know it. And we can recall it off the top of our heads, but it's not really learning, it's just a knowing thing. We have to understand the difference between that. If we learn something, then we can apply it to the future problems or future assignments, future papers. And we focus on understanding thought processes rather than the right or wrong answers. And this is gold for students, understanding the process that they need to undertake in order to get to what the answer to the problem or complete the assignment. Open-ended questions. We went over this almost in the welcome phase, and that's one thing to remember too, is that these phases are just that. They're phases, they're fluid, they flow back and forth, they flow together sometimes. Christine noted that she would say, what are you working on today? That's great. We can also use that in the identify phase. What are some examples could you give me? Can you explain that in more detail? When someone says, can you just explain derivatives? What do you know about derivatives? Can you explain that in more detail to me, what you know? What do you already know about it? What do you already know about writing a thesis? What do you already know about a narrative? What it is that you think you don't know but would like to know? That's kind of a deep, fat question. Why do you think the professor assigned this? And how does this assignment fit into the semester of work? Something just to talk about for students, especially first-year college students that are just starting out. it's hard to see the big picture of why we do certain assignments and what it means for the end goal. If you wanted to know more about blank, where would you start looking? This is very good for students who are doing research or looking for specific formulas on how completing particular problems. Where would you start looking? Show me what you would do if you were wondering about this, if you were trying to explain it to me. This is very, very good for understanding what the student already knows and where we need to start. And then we get to the prioritize phase. This is where we prioritize what it is we need to work on. And like Christine said, and with this new program, we do have about 30 minutes for each student. The bookings program, which we're going to learn about next. And after the student identifies what they really need to work on, then it's time to determine how to use the time. We want to always avoid teaching. We already have faculty on campus and they are the teachers. We don't want to be explaining in a teaching dynamic to students about this is how you do that, this is how you do this is what you should do on this assignment. Instead, we want to facilitate the student's interpretation of the course text, handouts, or notes. I have taught freshman composition, developmental writing. I've tutored for many years, but I never want to impose my interpretation of the assignment onto what the student has handed me or is talking to me about. I'm always asking questions about, what do you think the professor is wanting here? Do you have any notes that you took during this lecture? Let's look at those and we can get to the point where you can understand what the professor wants you to do. Remember, as a tutor, you are not the source of information for the student. You want to help the student discover and understand the process of learning new concepts and course material. So we're not teachers, and there is a line between that. We haven't decided on a curriculum, we haven't typed out a syllabi, we haven't discussed assignments beforehand. We are reactive. When students come to us, we react to their questions rather than making up things for them to learn or devising ways for them to learn. This is an example of a thought process, a scripted session, if you will. We ask the student to explain the process for this task rather than showing them how to solve for X. You want to hear this. Explain this to me. And a student might say something like this: I should get all variables on one side, on numbers on the other, reduce by adding, subtracting, etc. Dividing numbers or variables from both sides of the equation to get one number. And then you say, that's good, now try applying it. And sometimes students will say, but I don't even know where to start. And next, your explanation of the basic process was clearly stated. Let's find an example in the textbook of this same process, and that will probably have the information about where to begin. See what that does there? It doesn't say to the student, start right here, do this and do that, and then you can get to understand what X equals. You always want to lead the student, help them to find the answer on their own and help them to be resourceful. Guiding, coaching, facilitating. Those are important things to remember when tutoring. Another thought process for writing tutors. Writing a thesis statement for a persuasive essay. Same thing, same script. We're just leading the student to what they need to know rather than writing out a thesis statement for them. I have a particular scaffolding diagram or a graphic that I use to help students build thesis statements. And it's nothing more than prompts. What's your topic? What's your opinion? What's another opinion? What is one thing someone might say in an argument against you? Now you have all of your components to write a thesis statement, and we're off from there. But as soon as students understand how to do it, then that's not a question that usually comes up ever again in writing a paper. So we have facilitated learning. When students don't come back to me with the same question, I feel like I've done my job. Okay, the apply phase. I'm looking at my time here. Okay, we have about 15 minutes. How do you think a student might demonstrate that they understand the concept? What do you think a student might say or do? Can be body language, anything at all that would lead you to think that, oh, the student is understanding this. My explanations are great, spot on. I know that they're getting it. What are some things that a student might demonstrate that they understand the concept? How do you think they might demonstrate that, I should say? Anyone?
They might kind of get that moment where like, oh, or they might smile and their body will just look more relaxed and less tense.
Yeah, that's a great one. More relaxed. Yeah, that's very, very true. That's an excellent point. Sometimes students will lean back and sigh and nod their head. A lot of it is very much implied in nonverbal language. So students won't often say, oh, yeah, I get that. No, it's more often conveyed in body language. That's a good point. Okay. This is the phase where connections are made. Students can successfully explain or summarize the new concept, which leads to application to the question, assignment, or problem. And allowing the students to explain the newly made meaning or knowledge moves the information to the long-term memory and ensures they can call upon it for solving future problems or completing future assignments. This is very important. I use this quite a bit with students when I'm helping them. I ask them, okay, we've gone over that. Now you tell me, you teach me like I don't really understand how to write a thesis statement, or I don't know how to write a conclusion or a topic sentence. Teach that to me so that I can understand it. That way, the tutor can see gaps. And I do keep referring to writing, but I am inclusive. I'm including math and concept problems too here. Ask the student, explain to me how to solve this problem. What is the formula that I should use? Once students start explaining it, then it becomes more clear to them. This is why professors are good at their job, and they're called professors, because they are professing every day the same information in different ways over and over and over, and they become very, very good at it. And that's just called teaching. And that is what we want students to do, is to explain it back to us, thereby moving it again to the long-term memory and being able to pick that out when they need to in the future assignments. And then we get to the confirm phase, which is where we engender academic hope and we energize students to be their best. We want to confirm understanding with appropriate affirmations concerning the problem-solving process the student completes. We want to reinforce specific accomplishments. You have a way with clarity explaining things, and it showed when you did those first two problems. Or the position you're taking on this topic is unique, and this paper will be interesting to read as well as write. You cannot believe how affirmations, positive affirmations, will just light up a student's life, because they have come to you with lots of self-doubt. And when you can say, this is great, you're doing good, you know how to explain things, or you understand very well what needs to be done here. You just need to keep moving forward. Instilling confidence is huge, absolutely huge. And we are here to do that for students. We don't want to go over the top though. Well, we've all read about overpraising lately. And remember that you're a peer, and it's just good to be mindful of how language will impact the student's perception of their academic abilities. It's much better to praise the process or parts of it rather than the outcome. Interesting studies done on that lately, how children who are overpraised for outcomes don't have the best outcomes as adults. Kind of interesting. Okay, we can do this instead of turning to the person. How about somebody give me an example of what you would say to end the session? Say it's 25 minutes or up, and we need to start winding it down. Anybody who's had experience with tutoring, can you give me an example of what you would say to flow into ending the session?
I would say that there will be a clear understanding on all the topics that you have now. If you have any questions, please come and ask me anytime you want to. I would also say thank you. Thank you for having the time to spare with me. And if there's already a comment or something else that I can help you on, well, please let me know.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I would also say something along the lines of like, you've done really well. It seems like you're really starting to understand this concept. I would recommend when you get home or when you have time, work on a couple more problems to really solidify it, to make sure you do understand it.
Wow, that's excellent too. Thank you, both of you, Jorge and Jessica. That's wonderful. Yeah, we want to know the difference between knowing and learning. We went over that. We can know a lot of things, but we haven't learned it until we can apply it to the next situation where it's required. And we do know that learning is a process of discovery and investigation. It's not just reading something and then trying to remember it, but it is a process, and it's a lifelong process. This is how we tutor, or this is how we foster independence. Like Jessica just said, we offer our continued support, but at the same time appreciate the work done by the student with appreciative language, and challenge students to apply what they have learned to the next assignment. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of confidence to move them to the next step, that they've got this, you can do this. You absolutely are going to be successful in this class. I can see how hard you're working at this. Anything like that that can affirm what the students want and need in their academic success. And Jorge said this, do you have any questions for me? This is excellent. And then you can fill in the gaps. Is there anything else that I should have addressed? I use this all the time. Is there anything else that you want to know that I should have talked about? And many times students will have another question for me, which is wonderful because I like questions. And this is a way to end it too, after we've gotten through ending the session. I enjoyed this time. Come back if you have more questions, but I know you'll do well on the rest of this particular assignment. And this is just another example. The most interesting part of this session was when you told me blank, or when you said blank, or I had never heard of blank. I've been tutoring a long time, like I said, and I learn things from my students, and it's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. I love learning new things that students come to me with, and I tell them that. I didn't know that. That's absolutely incredible. I appreciate that.